Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei. Today we have an interesting topic on our hand, the main problem with MCC. Before we get into it, I would like to throw out a lot of disclaimers because I don't want this to be misinterpreted at any point, but I understand that this is me talking negatively, at least partially, about MCC. I want to just clarify. I love MCC, I'm super passionate about it, I think it is the best Minecraft event out there. As the Block Wars organizer, I will admit that MCC is better. I like it a lot, but just because something is good overall, it doesn't mean that it's perfect. There's definitely flaws, and I think some of these flaws should be talked about because it's been discussed on Reddit, and I would like to just also voice my opinion. Obviously, I talk about events all the time, and I think it's valuable to MCC as well to receive a significant amount of public feedback, not just from players and testers, to be able to, we voice our opinion, and hopefully it'll be able to influence MCC in some way, shape, or form. Another thing I want to say is this will be mostly talked about in regards to Haunted Hoedown, but again, I really enjoyed Haunted Hoedown as an overall event experience. I did a watch party with a bunch of my friends. I had a really good time. I thought it was really fun. Nice to see like a normal, in quotations, MCC back again. And I think, in terms of event experience, it was good. I liked it. But again, just because overall it was good, it doesn't mean it was perfect. There was elements of the event that were meh. And we're going to talk about it a little bit today. First, let's get into the Reddit post that so what happened was there's a Reddit post and there's a second Reddit post. The second Reddit post motivated me to make this video. The first Reddit post motivated the second post to post. So we're going to start with the first post, this one, which I don't think is in the thumbnail. I don't know what this video is called, but Rocket's approach elytra durability needs to change in the event is the post, and it received a lot of upvotes. You might think that 160 upvotes isn't crazy, but for modern day MCC Reddit, that's a lot. That's not like an insane amount, but that's notable. So this seems to be a popular opinion, at least to an extent. I can't see the analytics, so I can't see how many people downvoted this, but it seems to be mostly agreed upon that, the way Rocket Spleef is right now needs to be changed because it's not working for a lot of people. There's flaws with it. Let's talk about it. So their post goes as follows. First off, I love elytra durability on MCCI. I think it's a great and fun mechanic that adds aggressive play and skill. Then they announced they were adding it to the event, and I thought, oh, that's a terrible idea. Then I watched it, and it was still a terrible idea. Then they kept it, and it continues to be terrible. Let's dissect this first. If you didn't know, Rocket Spleef has durability on the elytras now, where people can't fly forever. You have to go down and recharge your elytra before you can go back up. This wasn't a thing forever, but it started on MCC Island when Rocket Spleef was introduced, and it was brought to the event as well around the same time of it being introduced, I think. Maybe it took a little bit. I don't remember the exact time frame in between. However, this was first introduced on MCC Island, and it was received well on MCC Island. Not perfectly, because obviously it's a new mechanic, and people have to get adjusted, and change is scary, so people didn't love it immediately, but I think, in retrospect, it works very well on MCC Island because you're in a mini-game setting and format. This type of change will also apply to other games. We'll get into it a little bit later, mostly for this post. So yeah. Durability for elytras on MCC Island works well because you're playing in an environment that's shorter, lower risk overall. If you lose a round on MCC Island, it doesn't matter. You just queue for another game. It doesn't. You don't look at your stats. MCC, you lose a round. You're trying to win a competition, or at least trying to compete in a competition. Dying in a round sucks. You want to try to win, right? That's how that works. That's incentivized to do well in a competition. Works a little differently. So the goals in MCC event Rocket Spleef and MCC Island Rocket Spleef are different. So a mechanic for one of them may not work as well as in the other because they are not the same game with the same goal. There's not the same objective for both of them, technically. So yeah, they announced that it was going to go to the event. They think that was a terrible idea. If I recall correctly, when it was announced to come to the event, I was also hesitant because, again, like mentioned, this mechanic won't affect Rocket Spleef equally between Island and Event, and that's proven now. But let's continue. It adds way too much RNG into the game, and that didn't need to be there. The only positive is it makes credit more deserved, but someone can just decide to target you and your game can just end, or you can just get unluckily shot and at many times in a row by different people, and it's just over. That's partially true. I wouldn't say that RNG is the main problem with Rocket Spleef. I think the main problem is that the intended goal with the Rocket Spleef change hasn't resulted in the expected result. To explain, essentially what I think was tried to be done, what they tried to do here with the Rocket Spleef change is by adding durability, players like Phil, who used to dominate the game because they could just fly forever because they had this skill from playing hardcore Minecraft and knowing how to use an elytra, that they added the durability to nerf those types of players, or at least try to bridge the gap a little bit between the super high skill and the middle whatever tier skill, right, in Rocket Spleef. However, what has now happened is you've essentially flipped it, because, and I'm proof of this, by the way, Rocket Spleef is now a game where if you don't play MCC Island Rocket Spleef, you're at an immediate disadvantage. An immediate one, and especially nowadays that's unfair because Rocket Spleef is one of the lesser popular games, which isn't Noxer's fault at all, but it is true. You're at an immediate disadvantage in Rocket Spleef if you don't play MCC Island, which I think should never exist. People should still, and this is also mentioned here, I think, oh, is it mentioned here? It's mentioned here. People who practice on MCC Island should have an advantage in terms of game knowledge, but grinding on the server should not be mandatory to keep up with the event on a baseline. This is so factual. This is bars, okay? And I will agree with this forever. You should never have to play a specific game to be able to compete with the rest of the players, because it's going to be a standard. A lot of the people in MCC love MCC, so when they're streaming, they'll probably be on MCC Island at least sometimes at a frequent basis. People who don't play that all the time shouldn't have to now suddenly play MCC Island all the time just to be able to keep up. And if you want to use the argument, because I know this is a potential argument of, well, maybe it'll incentivize them to play MCC Island and that might boost MCC Island. That's not happening, and they're not going to suddenly be like, well, actually, shucks, I want to get 10 places higher in MCC for Rocket Spleef specifically. Let me suddenly do something I don't plan to do anyways, but I'll just do it for this one game. They're not going to play out MCC Island just to be better at Rocket Spleef. That's not that. These people that aren't doing super well at Rocket Spleef, the people that were mentioned, I think it was Phil, Harvey, and 5up. I could be wrong. I think those are the names that were mentioned. Phil, Harvey, and 5up. 5up is a variety streamer. I don't really see him playing on a Minecraft minigame server casually. Phil is a hardcore Minecraft streamer. I don't really see him playing on a Minecraft minigame server on stream actively. He might sometimes, maybe once, but that's about it. And then Harvey's a speedrunner. Harvey does speedruns. He doesn't really play on MCC Island either. I don't think they're going to change their content just to be able to compete at MCC. I think that's unfair. I don't know. That's maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's unfair. Anyways, go back to this post. So there's other factors that come into play as well, with the whole like RNG, blah blah whatever. I think this is partially true. One thing that I think this change with Rocket Spleef has mainly done is, instead of bridging the gap between the top player and the middle tier, or whatever the intended goal was, it has now increased the gap between the bottom player, then the middle section, and then the top section. The people who are not good at Rocket Spleef base Rocket Spleef are now worse because they have to now factor in an extra element of gameplay that is, first of all, custom, second of all, probably confusing if you haven't played it before. Prime example, Masayoshi in the first Twitch Rivals event. John is not a bad Minecraft player, but this is a mechanic that he just didn't adjust to. He didn't know this was going to be a thing, and it significantly negatively impacted his gameplay experience. So I think, depending on the approach of MCC, because if MCC were to go in a competitive route, which I don't think they're doing, especially with some of the rosters that we've seen recently, if MCC were to go in a competitive route, this elytra durability change could be great. And I think if you look at MCC Season 3, it could have made sense, right? Sure. But I don't think it has aged very well in Season 4 because of the different approach to the event. However, I do want to mention one thing, and that is that I do think that the idea of reverting the durability change is maybe slightly unrealistic, because it would kind of expose that the Noxer made a mistake, and I don't know if, it might be too late to revert it. What they could try to do and this was mentioned, I think, in, I don't know which post specifically it was mentioned in, but what they could try to do, is try to adjust Rocket Spleef, test out Rocket Spleef adjustments to work better with the Elytra durability if you want to stick to it. I still think that Rocket Spleef Rush, at least, Rocket Spleef Rush prior to the Elytra change was amazing, and we'll get to that here. But I still think that was amazing. Unfortunately, I think it has decreased in quality for me now that Rocket Spleef is, you know, a durability Elytra thing, and then also being on Island, I think, is also another factor that comes into play. We're going to talk about it more here. Either way, there's more things about this post that I'm sure I could agree with, but the main point is the Elytra change has not benefited Rocket Spleef in the event. It has negatively impacted it overall. That's the consensus that I want to make sure that, you know, is clear from this post. However, how are they going to fix it? The ideal perfect solution is revert. I don't think they're going to do that, because I just don't know if the Noxtru would want to revert a change like that, because I don't know, maybe they could, I don't know, maybe they would. I hope they would. I just don't see it happening, but I really, fingers crossed, hopefully they would. I don't know. Anyways, the actual main post that we need to talk about now. Oh, actually, well, here you go. Oh, it wasn't Phil, it was Scott. Oh, Phil as well, but whatever. So here's the actual post that I was talking about in terms of the skill gap stuff. One, increases the skill gap have been apparent that those who don't stream MCCI frequently, Harvey, Scott, 5up, etc., put at an enormous disadvantage to those who do. MCC's games are too similar to the MCCI games currently, and that is just bad. For Skyball, for example, you gain so much experience on how to optimally play through MCCI with the instructions for levies. There's practically no difference between the two, and it's shown tremendously with the performance that we've been seeing. Sky Battle, I partially agree with, because I forgot to actually say this before the video started. A lot of this discussion happened on my stream today. Carter is not involved. We were just watching Blissful, and the finale took about 30 minutes for 2 rounds, so we were just bored, and we started talking about MCC. Sandwich gave his thoughts that he said that Sky Battle, and I agree. Sky Battle, I don't think is super negatively impacted from MCC Island's existence. I do think if MCC were to have levies and glowing orbs and all these items that are on MCCI that should be at least exclusive to MCCI, then yes, I agree, it would be bad. However, the main goal of the game is still different, and as much as, you know, in Rocket Spleef, the change, well, actually, it's the same thing. In Rocket Spleef, the Island version became the event version, right? Or the other way, the event version became the Island version. Sky Battle mostly has not become the Island version yet, but some parts of it have. And when those parts of MCC Island came to the event, it became worse, or at least it was generally agreed upon by the community that it wasn't better. So, Sky Battle, right now, because I don't think they have hard sent these changes. You've clearly not seen levies in every single rotation of the round, so clearly they're aware that it doesn't work perfectly. Right now, I don't think Sky Battle is bad, because, like Sandwich Lord mentioned, the way you'll play on MCC Island versus Sky Battle versus Event, and it's also mentioned in this post, I think, is that you approach the game differently. It's either mentioned here or mentioned here. I don't know specifically. We'll talk about it a little bit. So yeah. Anyways, with Rocket Spleef, like mentioned, skill gap is increased. Sky Battle, technically the skill gap could be increased, but I do think that it's apparent from some performances in you know the event over time, that some people who play these games on MCC Island are clearly doing a lot better in the event when the event games are like MCC Island. That makes sense, right? I'm a prime example of this because from someone, obviously I used to be a tester, but I will stand by it that my tester knowledge, quote unquote, had absolutely zero relevance to my performance in MCC Twitch Rivals EU. I don't think it had any effect because the games were just entirely different from the last time I had played in a Minecraft or an MCC test, right? It's entirely different. Testing did absolutely nothing. However, Island did. And also I obviously watch MCC a lot, so I understand how the event works, so that helps a lot. But Island did a lot because on MCCI, 2 games that I was playing just casually because I enjoyed them, not to practice for MCC, but just because I enjoyed them, were Hole in the Wall and Rocket Spleef. And guess which 2 games in MCC Twitch Rivals EU I got first individual in? Hole in the Wall and Rocket Spleef. Why? Because they are almost the exact same as the MCCI version. However, I will say for Hole in the Wall, the MCCI version, thankfully the modifiers for MCCI aren't on the event, because I just don't think that would work. But the gameplay core is still the same, so it means that I was able to just practice, essentially. Same with Feinberg in Season 4 Kickoff, exact same situation. You can practice Hole in the Wall on MCC Island just casually, and you're just going to do way better, probably. At least if you have the mechanics for it, you're going to do way better. Anyways, I feel like I've been rambling way too long. I need to get back to the topic at hand, because I want to actually make this video as constructive feedback and helpful for the Noxru to be able to look at MCC, and hopefully for 2025, I don't expect any of this to be looked at for this year, because I assume they already have things planned out immediately or fully, right? But hopefully for 2025, with a new season, some changes can be made to kind of bring back some of the original qualities of MCC that I think have partially been lost. Another thing that they mention here is other forms of practice are redundant. It's been apparent that the practice server is going to shut down, most probably, to be moved to the main server. The main server's practice, barring Ace Race, of course, is also far inferior to what MCCI provides. For MCCI, you simply have more maps to practice for Battle Box, for example. I do agree with this too. MCC Island, as of right now, which I don't think is a super fair comparison yet, but as of right now, is the superior practice mode for MCC. If you want to practice for MCC, play MCC Island. You don't even need to really touch anything else. You'd be fine. Obviously, if you want to practice fully, you want to play Ace Race like mentioned, but that's about it. However, I think that comparing MCC Island, which has been running for like a year plus, I don't know how long it's exactly been, but like a year plus, compared to the practice area on the server, which has been around for one event, basically not even one event, I don't think is a very fair comparison. I assume the practice area on the server will be expanded on whenever they find the time to do so. But yeah, I don't think it's a fair comparison. But technically, as of right now, if you're just looking at it with no context, yes, MCC Island is better than the practice that is on the event. However, I do think that the event's practice could end up being better than Island soon, unless Island is expanded upon more, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Anyways, another thing that they mention here is that a severely harmed parkour warrior. Oh, this point is fantastic. People didn't understand this when I talked about it, but there's some more stuff to it. Severely harmed parkour warrior, MCC Island, that is. I think we can all agree that we've been seemingly been seeing more difficult endings being completed by more people every next MCC. To remedy this, Noxru has been making it harder and harder every event. Partially, I agree with this, but not fully. I think the hard ending this time around was one of the easier hard endings we've seen. So I think this one specifically doesn't factor that in. However, I do think that hard endings in general have been a little bit hit or miss in terms of like how difficult it is and if it should really be that difficult. Because some of the hard endings that we've seen, like the 4-block hop around, but the platforms disappear, and then there's Neos or something. So many things going on. That one is evil. Like, but there's other ones like this one, the ones with the chains. It's been on MCC Island all the time. Like, people are just used to it. It's not that difficult. People just swept through it. Like, hard endings, sure. What I do think is, oh, actually here, it'll be talked about further. To my knowledge, no one got that last gold medal. However, making it harder to try and stop MCCI Switch just make it a pain for those who don't play competitive Minecraft, much competitive Minecraft. Yeah, I think one thing that I mostly agreed on, I don't think everybody who played wasn't able to get the gold medal. I think somebody said that Feinberg maybe got it, but I don't know if that's true. The last stage on the last hard extra path, right? The last side path that you can go on as like a challenge thing. The final level was so much harder, at least in my opinion, from what I saw. I probably am misremembering, but it looks so much more niche and difficult than the previous levels that like people like Shane and Purpled and whatever, right, weren't even trying it. These are good parkour players, especially within MCC. These are good parkour players. Those levels just aren't worth it, pretty much. Like, it's just too hard. But I think one thing that is important to note is what is that talked about further. Sorry for my example, but imagine a bottom frag from the user blockers roster playing Parkour Warrior that hate it because it would be far too hard. I know this point is tied directly to point 1, but I've seen no one talk about how the skill gap MCCI creates affects Parkour Warrior. I do think this argument is slightly skewed because the goal of MCC is not the same as the goal of Block Wars. Block Wars is introducing variety creators who don't play Minecraft into Minecraft events. Kind of a win-win situation where the Minecraft community is introduced to new creators that they maybe haven't heard of, but these new creators are, able to compete in something that's new to them. A Minecraft event that actually thinks about variety creators and builds the event around variety creators. It's not perfect, I'll say that right now. Block Wars is not perfect before anyone thinks that, but Block Wars is probably the best event for variety creators to be able to compete in right now. You can't compare that to MCC, who, for the most part, MCC hasn't really adjusted to variety creators in the event. So saying that like a bottom tier player from Block Wars competing in MCC would have a bad experience is common sense, I think, because the event is just harder. It just is a higher skill bar compared to Block Wars, I think, generally speaking. Either way, I do think they make a point. Because, and this happened with Parkour Warrior previously, we thought this fix for Parkour Warrior would have fixed the previous problem with Parkour Warrior, for reference. What happened with Parkour Warrior previously, it was one long course with checkpoints essentially, right, with little levels, etc. What happened was because people like Dream, people like Pete, etc. were able to finish the entire thing, parts of the course were made more difficult. But what happened is some of the weaker players that also are competing in MCC at the same time were no longer able to progress past a certain level because that level was now way too hard. But the goal for that being too hard was to nerf the really good players, but what happened was the really good players obviously still got nerfed. But now what you've done is, instead of bridging that gap between the most insane player and the worst player, you've essentially just kept the same skill difference, but you've moved it down like a tier. Because now the best player won't get the entire course, but it'll get almost the entire course. But now the worst player won't get through 4 levels, but get through 3 levels, for example, right? So the same gap exists, but the gap has just been moved down. That's essentially what's happening with Parkour Warrior now. Because the side paths are being, or at least from what's being said here. I don't know if this is factually correct, maybe this is a misinterpretation, but I'm just assuming that what they said is correct because I don't pay attention to Parkour Warrior levels that much, but other people really do. If Parkour Warrior side paths are increasingly being made harder to quote-unquote stop the good players from being able to consistently pop off, what you're doing now is, yes, these good players might complete less levels in total, but so will the bottom players. So this gap in skill isn't being closed, it's just being moved down, which doesn't help anybody. Because now the top player will still be like, oh, I gotta fight for that challenge, I gotta get through this, the MCC has really tested my skill level here. The bottom player's now gonna be like, wow, I suck, this isn't fun, like you're not able to play the game. Partially at least, you're no longer able to compete because it's too hard. Obviously, again, this isn't a thing that applies to everybody, but partially it does apply because that's just how that makes sense, right? That's what the changes are. It makes sense that that's the result. Anyways, next point. 4. It has made some games outright worse. The vast majority of people here can agree that Rocket League Rush has actually gotten worse with its MCCI-esque changes. This is already talked about here. We don't need to really get into this again because I already talked about it for like 5 minutes. Next up, Sky Battle as well has been receiving a far more negative response thanks to the MCCI-ification. Remember that you would see so many Sky Battle clips in MCC's golden era. Comparison, I haven't seen a single clip from it this MCC. This is true, however, I don't think this is exclusive to MCC. We talked about this a lot on stream yesterday. I just think the interest in Minecraft events in general has died down, of course. What I will say is I think the community itself has just been condensed a lot more. It's a stronger community because the people that are active in it really care, for the most part. However, before we had more people, and with the increased quantity, there would be more people that would like casually check out, like, events and stuff, casually talk about it. You just had more people talking in general. There would be somebody, there is at least a higher % chance that there's somebody who would bring up a clip or something That's just no longer happening. I do agree that Sky Battle used to have way more moments that were interesting, but I don't think Sky Battle is exclusive to it. I think that's just the event community in general. I don't think that's Noxtru's fault at all, in my opinion. Anyways, this post is not saying that all changes should be reversed. The changes to the battle box have been received positively, here at least. I'm just saying that things like alleged durability are a net negative to their own games. I do agree with this. Battle boxes changes have been good. MCCI-ifications of whatever, right, haven't just been bad. I think Battle Box has been better. I don't think it's significantly better, but I think it makes the game a little bit more interesting, and I think it's cool. I think it's a fun little elements of gameplay that work in Battle Box, because the objective is the same. Your playstyle isn't mostly going to change, because for Battle Box, there's two options. You either kill your opponents, or you fill the wall before you kill your opponents. That's two strats. On MCCI, more people go for the killing part, but there's an additional strat on the event that isn't mandatory, nor is killing your opponents mandatory. That doesn't change. So Battle Box isn't affected negatively from this type of change compared to Sky Battle or Rocket Spleef. Okay. Anyways, there's a reply to this saying that I feel like we're the MC beginning to resemble MCCI more hurts than it helps. Side effect having the server would be that people would play on MCCI have an advantage over those who didn't, but I don't think that's necessarily negative either. In theory, it wouldn't have been much different than practicing with a group of people on the practice server, only with more variety. That gives people a way bigger advantage than it really should. AKA, the skill gap is increased. I also just want to add a few of your points. Rocket Spleef think the changes work exclusively on MCC Island. We don't need to talk about this. I understand this. I do agree with, like, you know, MCCI is 20 people. The changes are made to have more aggressive play, blah blah. It works more for an island multiplayer micro server setting than it works for the event. We don't need to talk about that again. Sky Battle, Parkour Warrior, and similar spots as well. Same thing. I already talked about this. We don't have to keep talking about it. Sky Battle, pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one. The addition of levies is just not it. It runs into the same problems as Rocket Spleef Rush. In MCCI, you're not incentivized to play more aggressively. This is because there are less players and because it's much easier just to die and join a new game. The levies are meant to supplement this, acting as both an emergency save, allowing you to rush on other players, as well as allowing for any new movement option to allow for a new movement option to push other teams. In MCC, people want to naturally play more passive, but they are put at a huge disadvantage with the presence of these items. Quite literally, in terms of mechanics, with the addition of levies, the only differences are 1, the number of players in the game, and 2, you can craft items. That doesn't make it fun for people who don't want to grind out MCC Island. That is very true. I don't really have anything to add to that. They made a good point. I agree. Like, MCC's Sky Battle, if you introduce all these custom items from MCC Island into Sky Battle permanently, which I think with the responses from this time and especially the last time where they did it with, I think the like water, not the water the water pew pew game, but the same map afterwards, levies don't work. Levies shouldn't be in the event unless there is a map that specifically is built for it. But even then, because you have a roster with, like, let's say 50% people who actively play MCC Island and 50% who don't, you're just gonna have an increased skill gap because you're using custom items that half your roster is familiar with and half your roster isn't familiar with, which with a regular MCC I think isn't the best thing to have. Anyways, I made a big deal about forcing aggressive plays being a bad thing, but I can see why some might disagree. However, that's like if they added a mechanic in Battlebox where you couldn't wall from the beginning. It forces players to play in a particular way, which just isn't healthy for the event. I really don't ragging on Nasser, but I do think this event in particular showed why it can harm the enjoyability of the event. This is a very valid point. Battlebox is a prime example where, hypothetically speaking, if they actually fully MCCI, the MCCI-ification of the event actually fully happened, Battlebox would be ruined. Because now you are closing off the ability for some players to wall rush. You're taking away from the game. I don't think Noxford would ever do that, hopefully. But it's a prime example of why MCCI and MCC don't work. Even on MCCI, I actually think on MCCI having the battle box thing locked in the beginning is good because most players are there to just PvP, and I do think it's frustrating in a setting like that to constantly have to worry about wall rushing, especially when obviously you're going to have the speed sparks in a lot of the kits, etc. So there's probably optimal ways to do it. However, wall rushing is still a frequent occurrence. I know a lot of people get angry at it, but it's a frequent occurrence, and I think it's fine. Like, wall rushing is part of the game. If you lose, you lose. Like, suck it up. I don't know, man. Like, that's just part of the game. Anyways, something, again, that I think should be really, really, really nailed down. People who practice on MCC Island should have an advantage in terms of game knowledge, but grinding on the server should not be mandatory to keep up with the event on a baseline. I think this is so true, and I hope that this comes through properly because it's so important to note. MCC Island shouldn't be mandatory, but it should still help to get better at the event. Anyways, that's enough of the post. Next up, this. So I did a slight tier list. I don't fully stand by this because I'm sure my opinion can be swayed one way or another about one of the games. And also, if somebody is like, oh, you put Rocket Spleef in great, but then put Railroad in good? Does that mean Railroad is worse than Rocket Spleef? No, not necessarily. This is just my first interpretation of these games, and I just want to talk about every single game in MCC, and why I think it's relevant to talk about them is because yesterday, after my stream, and maybe on stream too, but especially after my stream, I was talking to some people, and they made a tiny discovery, I guess. MCC, obviously, this year has been doing a fantastic job with their events. They've been hosting events that are really impressive, really cool. Ender Cup, 2 Twitch rivals, etc. Fantastic events. I love it. Keep it up. Keep that going. That's good. Big thumbs up. However, when you then go back to a regular event, you start to realize that the main thing that people pay attention to in these regular events are the gameplay changes. Obviously, this time around, there was a lot of new maps, and that's good. I like that there's a lot of new maps. However, because the games still have been played in a lot of these other events, even though they're special, at its core, the games function the same, they're the same games, you start to notice that we're getting to a point where the event is getting a little bit stale again, at least for a regular event. For example, the only brand new gameplay that has been recently introduced is Railroad Rush. You could argue, maybe the Parkour Warrior from Ender Cup, because it was different. Sure, that's fine. But Railroad Rush is the only brand new content to MCC. And no other game is getting game reworks. So at its core, these games are all the same game. Which is fine, because they're good games. However, to keep interest with MCC and keep things fresh, you can't just make new maps. You have to make new games. And I understand as well, there's a lot of games in MCC, and adding more games to it means more games get cycled in and out. But I think that's a good thing. There should be more games at MCC. I think Railroad Rush has been a very great refresher, and I think still to this point, because it is the only thing that has been added, it's the main refreshing part of the event to look forward to, in my opinion. Because even Bingo, which was introduced late 2023, I think, had a really positive reception at the start, but I think the 2 most recent renditions of Bingo, because Bingo at its core is still just Bingo, it's not a completely renovated game, it's not living up to the potential compared to something like Railroad Rush. So I think before we get into every single game and whatever I think about it, I think that one of the main things I would like to see, especially in 2025, I think it's probably, again, too late for this year to make changes if they don't already have it planned. I would like to see more than one new game in 2025 for MCC. And this isn't easy. This isn't just just make a new game. I understand there's a lot of testing, there's a lot of decision making that goes into making new games. But I think it's important for MCC's freshness to have multiple brand new pieces of content in MCC. Not just the event and the event's title and the event's aesthetic, but the core gameplay of the event needs to be different. Because I think, as much as these are really good games, Once a game gets played multiple times over and over and over, it loses its quality. A prime example of this, and I don't want to stray this event too much, but it is true. Minecraft Mayhem is an event that isn't currently running, but was very actively running this year, which the general consensus on their gameplay is they have two fantastic games. They're actually over here. Ignore that this is bad. This is just to prove a point later. There is Spleef and there is Factory Frenzy. Spleef is a rendition of Spleef where the round changes over and over actively. It's a really fun rendition of Spleef. It's good. I like it. It's good. Factory Frenzy is a building game. It's a teamwork building game where different layers will be assigned to different plots and your teammates can all work on them separately to work together to make a build complete. It's a very good way to do a teamwork building game. The main thing with these games is Spleef has been in for a while and it's played every single time. These games don't get benched, and Spleef is good. However, when Spleef and Factory Frenzy by extent as well, but mainly Spleef, is the main thing people are looking forward to in an event, and it's played over and over because the event ran actively and frequently, Spleef loses some of its quality. It loses some of its specialness because it's just played every single time. And this will apply with Block Wars too. If Blitz Hunt was played and no new maps were introduced to Blitz Hunt, right? And you just play Blitz Hunt the entire year, every single month, every single time, Blitz Hunt would also not be as good as it was before. However, the difference is with Blitz Hunt, because it's a different design game, new rooms can be introduced, new strats can be introduced, it feels fresh. That's how that works, right? Spleef, a little bit trickier. If Spleef was actively given new round types, it'd be fine, right? That's a prime example. Factory Frenzy, I think, is fine. I don't need to talk about Factory Frenzy. This is just a good game. I don't actually have anything against Factory Frenzy. I also don't have anything against Spleef, but I used to think Spleef was like one of the best Minecraft event games, point blank. I now think it competes, but it's not nearly there. Either way, point to be said is when you are running events consistently and your core games are the same, and there's going to be some games that specifically people will be looking forward to. For example, I think mainly the ones in the amazing tier are the ones people will be looking forward to playing. Obviously, other games here apply as well, but you'll notice that a lot of these games are either some of the less popular games or they're on MCC Island, so they can already be played, frequently. But let's talk about it either way. Amazing, Dodgebolt. You don't have to change Dodgebolt. It's the best finale game. Don't touch it. You can do the cosmetic changes. That's fine. But you don't have to update Dodgebolt ever. I think Dodgebolt is a fantastic finale. It's super intense. I think anybody who says they don't like Dodgebolt is nitpicking. They are nitpicking to the max extent. Dodgebolt is a good finale game. And you should be happy as a viewer that MCC has Dodgebolt. Because as you can tell from every other event, the second best finale game is up for debate because it is really hard to make a finale game that competes with Dodgebolt. Dodgebolt's fantastic. SOT generally agreed upon to be one of, if not the best Minecraft event game out there. I do agree that from a viewer perspective, it is hit or miss. Some people love it, some people don't like watching it, but I think from a playing perspective, it is one of the best experiences you can have in a Minecraft event as long as you have a supporting team that will help you with understanding the game in the instance that you're like someone who's less experienced with the event. SOT is good. Fantastic game. Doesn't need to be changed actively, but I do think that as long as it, at a semi-frequent basis, receives new content, new rooms, whatever you want to call it, SOT is fine. You don't have to change the core gameplay of SOT. It's good. If MCC ran for another 10 years and SOT was the same and it only had different rooms every single time, I'd be fine with it. That's perfect. Ace Race, I think Ace Race has been receiving some of the best new content we've seen this year. I think new maps, new mechanics introduced have been really refreshing. I think it's really good. I think Ace Race has been looking fantastic, and I think it is a phenomenal racing game. I will say that racing games are just racing games, but I'm not gonna say that a game is not good because it is just a racing game. It's within racing games, which I think are generally agreed upon to be pretty good, it is a fantastic contender. So Ace Race is good. And then Meltdown. Meltdown, I think, is probably maybe a more hot take in terms of being considered amazing. I think Meltdown is just one of the best ways to do PvP for any type of player. I know that there are flaws with Meltdown, like spawns that can negatively impact somebody's gameplay experience. However, I do think Meltdown at its core is a well-designed game, and I do think it is one of the main highlights of MCC recently. When Meltdown was introduced to MCC, I feel like it revitalized the event slightly because it was a new game that was really, really good. That's my opinion, though. Anyways, that's the amazing tier games. I don't think these games need to be touched up much. Generally speaking, map changes are all that you need to do for SOT, Ace Race, and Meltdown, and you'll be fine. I think these games don't need any super crazy amount of attention, and I think, as long as there's new rooms for SOT and Meltdown, and occasionally a new map for Ace Race, you're fine. Because I think Ace Race has now introduced enough new gameplay mechanics for it to be fresh enough compared to other events. Next up, Great Tier. Great Tier is kind of the tier of games that I think are the MCCI games that are really good and haven't been like I don't know. Rocket Spleef used to be an amazing tier, so like I've already talked about it. I don't need to talk about Rocket Spleef anymore. Rocket Spleef used to be up here. It's now here because of the MCCI changes. It's still a great game. I don't agree with people saying that it's bad. Rocket Spleef is still good. I just think that reverting the changes would put it there immediately. Rocket Spleef used to be my favorite game in MCC, and now I think it's good, but it's just not as good as it was before, in my opinion. Next up, Sky Battle, I guess, doesn't need to be talked about. I already made my point clear. Sky Battle, I think, was also in the amazing tier. It was just a very good rendition of a Sky Wars type game. I think a lot of the MCCI related changes, to make it go down a little bit. I think some of the maps are very hit or miss. For example, the Haunted Hoedown map, fantastic. But some of the other maps, I can't remember the names, not as good. So hit or miss, but I think it's still a great game at its core. Hole in the Wall, so I already talked about a little bit. I think Hole in the Wall at its core is a good game. As long as there's frequent updates to the holes and the maps, it's good. For example, when I played Hole in the Wall, there was a new map with a new floor, and I thought that was amazing. I really loved that because I had to adapt. It was cool to have to adapt to a new version of the game. I think it was really good. So Hole in the Wall, great. BattleBox, because BattleBox currently is one of the games that receives new maps the most frequently, and it has some gameplay elements that get sprinkled in and out, rotated in and out rather. I think BattleBox is in a really good spot, and I think it's great. That's really it. I mean, BattleBox debatably could be amazing, but the reason I don't put it in amazing is because the maps can be very hit or miss. So it's just great, which is really good, by the way. Amazing is like 10 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10. Great's like 8 out of 10. Good's like 7 out of 10. It's like 6 or 5 out of 10. And then bad, there is no game in bad. I don't think any MCCI game is genuinely bad, okay? No MCCI game is genuinely bad. People who say that any MCCI game is genuinely bad, I think are coping. That's my opinion. Next up, good tier. Build Mart. I know. How far have we come that Build Mart's now made it to a good tier? It's not at the bottom. This is not ranked within the spaces, by the way. This is just generally speaking. Build Mart, I think, has benefited from not being in the event much. I think, obviously, previously with some of the Dream SMP audience, Build Mart was hated on unnecessarily, I think, just because the streamers didn't enjoy it as much. However, I think it's aged decently well. And I think it's fine if Build Mart was thrown into the rotation, occasionally. I don't think Build Mart should be in every event. I don't think it should because I just don't think that would benefit the event. However, I think it should be in occasionally. And I think it has been, and it's been nice. And I think hopefully we could see Build Mart in rotation for November or December. Because I think it'd be good. I think it would be a positive for MCC. So I like Build Mart. It's good. It's not great because there are flaws to Build Mart, but I don't think they necessarily need to be fixed. I think Build Mart's just okay, and it's at a very comfortable spot in the roster for MCC. I don't think they need to do anything special to it right now. Grid Runners is good. I will say, at its core design, I think Grid Runners is a great game. However, Grid Runners is massively held back by the amount of maintenance that is needed to be able to keep Grid Runners interesting and fresh. Which is why I think it goes down a little bit, because that is technically a design flaw. I think Grid Runners is really cool. Team challenges are really cool. Working with your team, I think, is always fun. It's a game that doesn't require super high mechanical like PvP or parkour skill. It's just a game where you need to use your brain and think. I think it's cool. However, because a lot of the maps tend to be the same, you kind of run into the same issue with skill gap and experience difference, where depending on the roster, especially this year, the roster is it fluctuates a lot with what type of player is included. I think that grid runners can be hit or miss, because if you have a room that everybody knows but some people don't know it, then the people who don't know it are probably going to be not as good. But I do think that grid runners is good. I like it. I still stand by it. Grid runners is overhated. I think it's great. Well, I think it's good. I should say it's great. I think it's good. Core design is great, but because of the difficulty with updating the game frequently, I put it in good. But if they were able to update the maps frequently for grid runners, it would be great. That's my opinion. So I would honestly put it there, but I'll put it here for now. I'm putting it right there. Sorry, I changed my mind. Parkour tag. I don't think parkour tag has anything really wrong with it. I don't understand why parkour tag is disliked by the players so much. I feel like a round-robin parkour game is cool. I think the teamwork aspect is cool. I like the way it's formatted, and I would like to play it. I think it'd be sick. Like, and I will say though, compared to other events, parkour tag is in a difficult spot because it's competition. It's a blitz hunt and chalice chase, which are two of the best event games in the entire event scene. Like, those are generally agreed upon to be fantastic game modes. Parkour tag is the worst out of the three, but I still think it's good. Like, I'd still rate it a 7 out of 10. It's a good game. So I don't think there's really much wrong with parkour tag. I just think the players dislike it. We don't really get to see it much, and I guess because it is not in rotation frequently, it kind of is benefiting from that, similar to Build Mart, because when it does appear, it feels fresh, it feels special. So I think that's good. Railroad Rush is up next. I'd honestly argue that Railroad could be seen as great, but I think the more Railroad gets played, the less I will enjoy it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. That's just because Railroad is a fixed game. Once somebody figures out the strat for Railroad in its current state, the game is completed. Feinberg has been a great showcase of this because, or at least Feinberg's team and Feinberg himself, but I do think Fein is a massive contributor to that performance. Has been a proper showcase of this because he is the first person now to have figured out a way to get to the fourth room, which hasn't been done before. This is the first time it's been done. Once the game is played again, people are going to look at the Feinberg POV, probably, and probably learn from it, and it'll probably be done twice, maybe 3 times, or maybe not. I could be wrong. Maybe it won't be, but that's how I view it. However, I do think one thing, and this was brought to my attention on my stream, is that I think my perspective on Railroad is a little bit tunnel visioned. I'm currently not looking at Railroad as a game with a lot of potential, but I do think it has potential. I didn't think about that because I don't know. My first perspective on the game was just very, very tunnel visioned. I just looked at Railroad Rush and I was like, this is a cool game. I like it. I want to play it. It still holds true. I really liked it when I played it. I think it was cool. However, I think it doesn't have an insane amount of longevity in its current state, which is true. However, I think some people in my chat, mentioned like, oh, they could add different ores that have different gameplay elements, etc. They could add different challenges in terms of the builds, and that is true. I think Railroad Rush totally could do that. However, I do think there is a opinion that was thrown around a little bit during the event that is factual, which is that Railroad Rush is technically just a massively expanded upon Grid Runners room, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but I think that is true. I think Railroad and Grid Runners being in the same event could be a little bit samey, which I think is still, like mentioned, fine. But yeah, Railroad is a good game. I think I just need to see it being updated significantly one time, and then I could bump it back up to great, because that's, I don't know, just my opinion. Next is the quote-unquote bottom tier of the games, because there is no bad game. They're just all, the rest ones are all light. They're all okay. Let's get into it. Parkour Warrior, we've already talked about. Parkour Warrior, it's held back by the MCCI changes. A lot of the parkour is just the same. It's not as interesting to watch for someone like me. I know there's some people who really love watching Parkour Warrior, even though it's the same maps. That's completely fine. You can have that opinion. I have a different opinion. That's okay. Parkour Warrior, I think, again, having the same games, the same maps, It's not only the same maps, but a lot of them are the same. Just makes the game feel less special, less interesting to me. I think the skill disparity, obviously most people in Parkour Warrior will be going to the POVs that they think are going to do the best. However, that's not exclusively the case. some of the weaker POVs are going to have a worse time in modern day Parkour Warrior, V2, I would say, of Parkour Warrior, modern day, than prior to MCC Island. But that's my opinion. I don't need to talk about it more. We already talked about it enough. So that's why I think it's okay. Like, I don't think Parkour Warrior is bad. I think it's all right. I wouldn't necessarily look forward to playing Parkour Warrior when I'm playing an MCC. I think mainly this entire section of games here are games I wouldn't necessarily look forward to playing in MCC. Maybe Bingo, but that's debatable, mainly because I just haven't played Bingo much. Also, I like Bingo. But yeah, these are mainly games that, like, I wouldn't, like, dislike playing these games in the event. I would just be like, okay, yeah, sure. All right, next up, Bingo. I guess that's the next game. So, Bingo, I think it's okay. Bingo, but fast, the modern day version, has a lot of quality of life changes that are good. It has a custom bingo board with some fun objectives on it, and I think that's great. And I think the first time it was played, it looked really fun. It looked really good. However, I think it's super map dependent, super, like, dependent on what the bingo board is, what items you need to get. And I think just the two most recent versions of Bingo have been slight misses. I think the ocean one that they had in kickoff, I think within the three most recent ones, two of them have been misses, because it's been brought to my attention that Bingo was in Pride. I just forgot about it. Bingo in kickoff was the ocean one, which I don't think was great, and then Bingo, the nether version, I think again was not great. So that's why it's an 8. I think the game is all right, it's solid, it's decent. Nothing really to complain about there. SG, I think is fine. Like, I don't know. I think SG just isn't in its core, and this is not an MCC issue necessarily. I just think survival games in general, no matter what event, even PB, which has the best SG, even PB, I just don't like. I don't love SG. I think it's okay. I don't hate it. It's just, it's all right, because SG is super high risk, high reward, and I think when a lot of your games aren't really that high risk, high reward compared to SG, like, SG can be super punishing for people that aren't necessarily making a mistake. They're just weaker at PvP, and that's their lose condition, as opposed to, like, Sands of Time, where, like, if you take a risk, you try to jump for something and you fall, like Feinberg, yeah, that's going to hurt your team a lot. But in SG, like, generally speaking, the teams that are losing early in SG just get unlucky. They spawn next to, like, a team that does really well, and or a team that's really good, and that good team is going to try to get kills because it's worth points, and the weak team just loses. It's out of their control. So I think SG is okay. Not bad, just okay. To get to the side, I think I've made it clear. It's probably my least favorite game in MCC. I don't know necessarily why. I just don't really mess with the vibe of To Get to the Side. I do think that the difference in maps can contribute positively to Get to the Side a lot. I think recently they've been doing a decent job with keeping things a little bit more fresh. And that's why it's landing an 8. I think previously I would have said that To Get to the Side was a bad game because I don't think it was getting updated super often. But I think recently it's been pretty good. It's been solid. I like it. So, or sorry, I think it's alright. So, I like it in, like, an okay way. So that's my opinion on that. Anyways, that's kind of my point mentioned now. I wanted to give my opinion about every single game because I just wanted to clarify that, some parts of the games may be held back by MCC Island and etc. This point has been made time and time again. I just want to make a video that just sums it up a little bit further, and we can just have an agreement or disagreement or whatever your opinion is on the fact that MCCI has not, on a net basis, it has negatively impacted MCC as an event. There's parts of it that are good. There's more parts that are bad. So hopefully for Season 5 of MCC, or whatever MCC in 2025 will be, things can be looked at, maybe some things can be reverted to make things feel more unique and special for MCC. That's my opinion, though. I may be wrong. I just wanted to voice my opinion because obviously I'm very passionate about Minecraft events, and I think it's important that people, when they have an opinion, should voice their opinion. And obviously the public, there will be mixed opinions or mixed thoughts about what you say. I'm sure there's people out there that fully disagree with what I said, and I'm sure there's people out there that fully agreed with what I said, and that's fine. Either way, that's it. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you understand, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.